I'm going to start with a sort of a very broad question, and I'm going to put it to Sajid first, if I may, Sajid. And that first question is this, the time that we live in, the greatest time to be alive? Not particularly at the moment after Manchester United's defeat, but generally.
First of all, thanks for inviting me, and thanks to Legatum for sponsoring this and all the work that Good Right does, especially in showing that conservatism is a lot more than pounds and pence and cents. I think it's a really important message. Is this the greatest time? I think we're very, very fortunate to live in this time, and one of the reasons I'd say that is because capitalism has won the battle of ideas. And so between 1970 and 2010, we have seen a reduction in the number of people around the world that live on $1 a day or less fall by 80%. And it wasn't the IMF that did that, or the UN, or the World Bank, or even international aid. It was because of the spread of capitalism. And we've been lucky enough to see that happen during our lifetimes. I don't pretend it's got the answers to all our challenges, of course not, but there is no better system, and I think that's one of the reasons we're lucky to be alive now.
Fantastic. And you may applaud at any time if you have a particularly good answer, but I would say if you do applaud, we'll have less time for hear their answers. So may you just make quick applause. Ruth Davidson.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sajid's right in terms of the measurables. So things like infant mortality is down, the number of people in extreme poverty around the world is down. But for me, I think the best time to be alive is, and in different places, is probably at the time where there's the biggest spark of hope. So whether that is, you know, Columbus landing in the New World, right the way through to things that are happening right now. I think the biggest regret I have is that I'm maybe not 5 or 6 or 7 years older, that I wasn't alive and politically conscious and watching the news and all the rest of it at the time that the Berlin Wall came down, and there was this big, massive shift. And I remember being allowed to stay up late because it was the 9th of November, it was the night before my 10th birthday, and I knew that something was happening, and I knew it was big and it was exciting, but I wish I'd been just that little bit older that I could have understood it. Because I work beside and have some tremendous people working in my team that have come from states that were from behind the Iron Curtain. And I think just that absolute spark of hope must have been just the most tremendous, life-affirming, hopeful time to be alive. And I hope that we see things like that again. I hope very much that we see it, for example, in North Korea. And at that point and at that moment in the world, that will be the very best time to be alive.
Fantastic answer. Ian Duncan-Smith.
Well,
thanks a lot. Cheers. That's my mum. It's not really.
Don't worry, we won't get any.
Were you old enough to see the Berlin Wall fall down here?
I don't remember it. Actually, I wasn't in Berlin. I was in another German city, and it was quite interesting what was going on there. But I wasn't actually. I was going to say I agree. Actually, you can almost take this whichever way you like. But I think the measure for this, for me, and I agree with Sajid, that the advance of capitalism bringing more wealth, spreading more wealth is critical. And I also agree that the key test, and I think Ruth's on one important feature, which is the only way to answer this question is what is the time that you feel that you were most tested and not found wanting. And I just think we are 75 years since a moment in British history when this country stood alone against the tyranny and foul filth of Nazism. And had we not done so, had those pilots, etc., not defeated the Germans, we would none of us today be sitting in this position to discuss how good things are today. So if you want my answer to that, the greatest time this country has ever faced is in that year from 40 to 41, when alone we showed what decency, tolerance and democracy stood for, and we put our lives on the line for it. And I think that was the critical moment.
I hope the Winston Churchill table over there was particularly appreciative of that moment. Secretary of State for Justice, Michael Gove.
Well, I have to be honest, I'm a bit of a reactionary. There were undoubtedly some things that were better in the past, because it was in the past that England used to qualify beyond the group stages of the Rugby World Cup. It was in the distant past in our history that Scotland used to qualify for the World Cup at all.
Oh.
And of course, it was in the past that Alex Ferguson was managing Aberdeen Football Club when he actually managed to hit the heights. I don't know what happened to his career after that. So there are some moments that you can cherish from the past, look back on, and say that those were special days. But actually, if one looks objectively, free of the film of sentiment, at the time in which we live now, it is the best time in the world to be alive. There's never been a better time to be a woman in the world than today. There are opportunities that women enjoy which for centuries were denied them. And the prejudice that held 51% of the population back, and which still holds them back in parts of the world, and indeed parts of our own society, has crumbled. It's the best time in the world, actually, to be a believer. There are more countries which are open to those who have faith and conviction and give them the chance to worship and to contribute in the way in which they believe is important, more than at any time in human history. It's the best time in the world to be creative. There are more opportunities, thanks to the liberating power of technology, for people to write, to compose, to create, to make a contribution. And I think it's also the best time in the world to raise children. I think for those of us who are reflecting on the opportunities available to our sons and daughters now, we know that they're limitless and that technology and, as Sajid has said, free markets have liberated them from so many of the constraints that they laboured under in the past. Now, of course, there are challenges, and we're going to go on to discuss some of those challenges that this particular new set of circumstances offer. But I think that we've got to be honest, that while every Conservative has a little bit of him or her that looks back and sees in our traditions and in our past something to cherish and something that shouldn't be eclipsed, it's also the case that we, thanks to the energy and creativity of individuals across the globe, are now living in the best time ever to be a human being.